Welcome to this Clark Lake Spirit Foundation Salute to Veterans. When you think of what military veterans have done for our country, it's no wonder we have a day devoted to them. Veterans Day was always special at our house when I was growing up and still is. Both my grandfather and father are veterans.
Growing up, I used to watch a lot of military shows with my dad, 20th Century Fox. He was in the Coast Guard, my uncles were in the service. So we always talked military things. I didn't have much of an interest in around the 1970s with Vietnam going on and the anti-war protests, things like that. But then I was in college. I was there about 3 years and didn't quite have 2 years credits, and I needed a different direction to go to. So I just thought of the military at that point. I joined the Air Force. I became a precision photo processing specialist. We downloaded and processed, developed, and interpreted aerial reconnaissance from F-4s. I was lucky enough to be stationed in England for about a year and a half. I'd like to acknowledge and congratulate the veterans this year. My father's 95 years old. Like I said, he was in the Coast Guard World War II. And those were the guys, those were the real heroes. We don't see too many of them left.
Well, I'm 95, and I was in World War II.
To my sisters and me, my dad was always larger than life. We didn't realize until recently what a hero he was in the war.
After the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, we all enlisted. I was very patriotic, I guess you could say.
Dad joined the Army Air Corps. He flew a P-51 in the war, and one day he was on a mission over Europe, and they were strafing. The plane in front of him was blown up. He swerved off, and his plane was damaged, but he was able to make it back to England. He didn't realize that his landing gear had been damaged, so when he landed, he crashed. He knew immediately on impact something was terribly wrong. He had broken his neck, and he was paralyzed from the neck down.
I couldn't feel anything below my neck, although my chest was very, very painful. And so they sent me home and recovered completely, ultimately, after about a year.
After a long recovery, Dad had a change of heart, and he took his life in a new direction.
Because I was taken care of by doctors, I decided I wanted to be a doctor instead of a lawyer like I sort of planned on being. And then along the way, of course, I met my wife, who was in med school, and fell in love with her. And that was the start of a very long relationship.
To avoid the draft, I decided to join the Navy, and in the aviation area. My dad was a pilot early on, so I thought that would be a good place to start, and I wanted to be a mechanic. However, after boot camp, I went to training, and instead of getting into mechanics that I thought I was best suited for, the Navy decided to put me in electronics. After spending quite a bit of time going to A schools and things, I caught up with the USS Bonhomme Richard and VF-211, which was a fighter squadron. The ship was dry docked in Japan at the time, and I came on board. Then immediately was transferred into plane captain division. As plane captain, I was in charge of the F-8 fighter jet, which was a leading MiG killer at that time for the U.S. Navy and Air Force. All the plane captains and everybody aboard ship, there was quite a camaraderie. We were there to do a job and do it correctly and get the war over with as soon as possible, even though it was very controversial. To us, we were on a mission to protect the U.S., and that was it. And to this day, I feel that was still a just thing that we did. And everyone that was involved in it and all the lives that were lost weren't lost in vain. We still are a free country. I thank the military for teaching me a lot of discipline, respect, and things. Sometimes I don't always show it, but I honor our country and our flag very much. And all the veterans, thank you for everything you did, and it was great working with everybody all through the years.
Obviously, at that time of in the world things were very unsettled, and I really felt like I needed to be a part of defending our country and being involved in what was going on. And because it would help me in school, I joined the Reserve Officer Training Program, the ROTC program. And because I was in engineering, I went into the Corps of Engineers branch in the ROTC program. After graduation, I immediately went on active duty, first to my engineer officer basic, and then there was a rude awakening when I got orders to go to South Korea for a year. My wife Nancy had to stay home and relocate back to Toledo from where we were living, and we had a 3-month-old baby girl that I was just barely getting to know. So we picked up stakes and moved, and I went to Korea, and I spent my year in Korea, not very far away from the DMZ, the demilitarized zone. There wasn't really any active fighting going on over there, but it was a very tense situation. There were an awful lot of remnants of the war. You could look at the hillsides, and they were still denuded from the war that it ended 20 years ago. I spent half of my time living in a tent, building roads for the South Koreans, and then I spent the other half of my time at Tongducheon at Camp Casey, and I was a facilities engineer there. So that was a little bit more like a normal Army job. The first 6 months, I won't say it was like Boy Scout camp, but we were definitely out in the field. And I experienced a monsoon and had absolutely no possible way to think about what a monsoon was like until I lived through one. Basically, you just hunkered down during the time of the rain and waited till it was over. You picked up the pieces, you dug out your equipment from the mud, and you moved on. We lived in tents. And the luxury of our situation, because I was in the Corps of Engineers, we actually had concrete floors in our tents that we poured with the equipment that we had over there. Most of the other guys weren't so lucky they had dirt. I was thankful I didn't have to go to Vietnam, but I didn't really enjoy being away from home and my wife and my new baby at that time.